Hey friends, welcome to 1 Minute with Monee, a podcast where we help busy adults live life with balance and harmony 1 minute at a time. I'm your host Monee, owner of Time Managed LLC, a full-service concierge and personal assistant business in Atlanta, Georgia. Visit our website, timemanagedllc.com, for more information about our services. Every week, I'll share tips for how you can manage your lifestyle and tackle your to-do list efficiently. Before we get into our discussion, let's listen in to our quick tip for the week. Hey friends, welcome to another edition of 1 Minute with Monee. Today we're going to be talking about my tips for mothering the mother in you. Now, motherhood is front and center this month. It's a reminder to take care of yourself, and you can do this by making sure that you have a solid self-care toolkit. Make sure that you're making yourself a priority, and then when things get hard because of feelings such as grief, make sure you pause and acknowledge those feelings. And then I cannot stress this enough. Make sure that you have a community of support through it all. This can be your family, your friends, or even a therapist. Now, I can't wait to share with you this beautiful conversation that I had on this topic with Moniek Garcide of Fit Life Wellness. So stay tuned for that episode to drop later this week. Let me know in the comments what's part of your self-care toolkit. Until then, be well and be balanced. Hey friends, welcome back to another edition of 1 Minute with Monee. We are going to dive deeper on the topic of mothering the mother in you. And I have the pleasure of having with me here today, Moniek Garcide, a psychotherapist. Welcome to our show, Moniek. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me today.
Yes, no problem at all. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in this profession.
Sure. So I am a licensed clinical social worker by trade. I currently work in private practice. I also provide clinical supervision for social workers coming into the field, so new social workers that need their license hours. And I teach. So I teach in undergraduate psychology and social work program and a master's level social work programs. So how did I come into my career? I think I have always, I was a social worker before I knew it. I think I've always been in that space of helping, in the space of just helping people navigate life, and I really enjoy that space. Like, I really love it, but I also love teaching in that space as well. So my journey through various settings like healthcare and then landing in a private practice just took me where I am right now.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. This is the month of May, and it's a time where we are thinking about our roles as moms, perhaps our own relationship with moms. Even if we may not celebrate or recognize the holiday of Mother's Day, we are inundated with all of the advertising and the posts, and and everyone saying Happy Mother's Day. So it's inevitable that we are thinking about our roles, our relationships with our mothers. And as women, we are, I think, doing the work of making sure we are whole and happy.
Yes.
And we're working, we're taking care of our families, and we're trying to take care of ourselves. And I say trying because
it's always a work in progress.
It is a work in progress, and it's constant. And for me as a mom, a working mom and entrepreneur, and also for what I do with my clients, it's a constant state of how do we find balance? How do I make sure everyone in my family is well? But am I taking care of myself? And I know I need to do it. I have my call with a coach. I have my call with a therapist. I'm exercising. I'm trying to eat right. But so it's all of these things.
All the things, yes.
Exactly. It's all of these things. And sometimes it's overwhelming.
Yes, absolutely.
And so how would you describe that feeling of overwhelm and what we can do to make sure we are finding that balance without crashing, burning out?
Yeah, so I tell people all the time, the list will never be empty. So we'll never check everything off the list. And I think when we start with that, that's really helpful to just breathe. Because when we're on that journey of everything has to be done, the list has to be complete, I think we just set ourselves up, right? Because we get disappointed we're not doing enough because there's still things on the list, or we are overextending ourselves because we're trying to complete all the things. And so I would start with just like giving yourself grace of like, there's always going to be something. And so it's prioritizing, those things in a way of where we need to pause, maybe some things that isn't necessary right now, but in it, like, how do you feel? So because the list is already overwhelming, right? Just to look at it, you're already overwhelmed. And so then you have to look at, where do I start? And where do I start and what do I need? So is the list your list? or is it everyone, right? So when you look at how you do it, do I need to be the only person doing it, or is this list shared? But I think sometimes we look at owning all of it because we're the caretakers, we're the ones taking care of everyone, and so we are the person responsible for everything on that and making sure everyone is good.
Mm-hmm. And I like that you mentioned prioritization. There's a concept called mothering the mother in you, or a term.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and how that kind of leans into some of that prioritization?
Yeah, so like that mothering the mother in you is really about taking care of you while you're taking care of everyone else, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we think about in past times, we've always kind of been at the bottom of our list. And so we've talked about how do we prioritize self. And I like to look at it like you are the core. And so if we're mothering the mother in you, we're starting from you, we're starting from the core. And then everything that you can get out is better. And you don't, and you're looking at, as I'm giving out, am I filling my cup? Am I giving myself what I need? Am I pouring back into myself just as much as I'm giving out to everyone else? And so it's like do I have the support? Am I taking the time for myself? All the things while you are showing up for everyone else.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good reminder too, because we have a cup, and if you think of the
yes.
the teacup, and we always hear this about refilling our cup.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, what I've been trying to think about and keep in mind is I need to give from my overflow.
Yes.
What's in my cup is for me,
mm-hmm.
and everyone else is going to get the overflow, so
mm-hmm.
that I don't have to strive as hard to make
right.
sure that my cup is full.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to have a toolkit per se of things
yes.
that I can tap into to make sure that my cup stays full.
Yes.
And if the overflow happens, then everybody can get the overflow.
Everybody's good, right?
What are some of the things that you recommend having in that toolkit?
Oh, in that toolkit, I think it's building in time for yourself. So building in moments where you can take a break, take a step away. With that toolkit, when we think about what we need for ourselves, we have to think about too of that it's not a solo thing. So like your support, what does your support look like? I always say when people start with their village, I like to look at it like everyone doesn't have what we call a traditional village. So how do you curate your tribe? So how do you make your tribe? And so how do you create that support with maybe your friends or maybe your neighbors or people that that aren't in the traditional village as we would think, outside of family that can support you. But looking at it in a way of how, as you're pouring out again, or we're talking about people getting your overflow, how are you pouring back into yourself? So again, are you taking the time you need? Are you actually thinking about your feelings or thinking about what do I need in this moment, right? So even our thoughts can get consumed with our family, with our kids, with things that they need. Am I thinking about myself? So when was the last time I thought about what do I really need? And so reminding yourself in many ways, whether it's taking a break, whether it's teaching your family that you deserve rest and breaks and things like that, right? Whether doing all of that, but in that kit, it's being able to say, okay, it's not just one thing, right? It's not the spas or all the massages that we love, the traditional stuff, but it's, did I take a break? Did I eat? Did I drink? Do I have what I need, in my space? And so I think that when we look at that, it's getting creative with what's in that kit, but it's more than just, again, going and being able to do the things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And in those moments of overwhelm, it may be hard to tap into the kit. So if someone is overwhelmed and maybe they're at their wit's end because they have all the things that they have to do for themselves, they're worried about their family and all the things that they have to do for their family, and it just is a overwhelming feeling to even think, okay, what do I need to do in this moment? Because like you said, you said to pause. However, when you're in the moment, it might just be hard to know what is the first step to take. So what advice do you have for in those exact moments when you are feeling overwhelmed?
I think in those moments, it's, I need a minute. Literally say, I need a minute.
Say it out loud.
Say it out loud. Let your people know, I need a minute. And I think that just kind of gives pause. Like that, just saying that gives pause. But I think saying that and then saying, okay, how can I sit with myself for a little bit? Because when we're overwhelmed, we don't make the best decisions. We aren't really regulating like we should. And so it's, how do you give yourself a minute to just come down? And whether it's in that minute that you breathe, in that moment that you just have silence and stillness, but taking that time to say, okay, let me take a step back, let me sit with myself for a minute, and then I can come back and address or deal with whatever's at hand. But I think that if we give that pause, we allow ourselves to come down, we allow our nervous systems to reset and just say, okay, let me breathe, and then let's see what's next.
Right. And in those moments, we also may be building up and I'm trying to think of the right word. It's not a toolkit, but really building up is it courage? The capacity to make sure that at our foundation, we are solid.
Yes.
So then when we deal with other things that come along, we are capable of handling those things.
Right.
So grief can come up in some of that, and especially around this time of year again, because we're inundated with all of the advertisings of the Mother's Day and things of that nature.
Right.
And it is a time to honor and celebrate if that is what you choose to do. But for some, it's hard.
Very.
And but if we have that foundation, how does that foundation contribute to you being able to get through those moments of grief at this point in time?
Yeah. I think the foundation is key because it's that it allows you to take the time. Right, it allows you to take the break, and so whether we have the support that we need, whether we're looking at, do I know what to do when I'm in this moment, right? When I'm feeling overwhelmed, it's being able to take the time to say, okay, I do need to deal with the feelings I have, the grief that I have, that is coming up in many ways. Being able to do that and still show up. But also do that in a way that you're giving yourself grace, that you're giving yourself that moment of, it's okay that you need to take a moment to go deal with that or to go work through that, right? You're not taking away from anyone to be able to address the feelings in that moment that you're having.
Right. Can we go a little deeper about some of those reasons why we may be experiencing grief when we think about motherhood?
Yeah, when we think about motherhood, like you said, you see all the posts, you see all the flowers and all the things, but there are a lot of people that deal with grief during that time. So whether it's the loss of a child, whether it's the loss of a parent, like a mother, it could be infertility. It could be you've had multiple miscarriages. It could be that you are grieving your own relationship, because sometimes you can have a mother that's present and still be grieving a relationship that you hoped you had with them as well. So grief can show up in many different ways. And so I think that it's not just, one way where you lost a parent, but there's so many things centered around relationships. And when we think about celebrating mothers and we think about celebrating Mother's Day, what that comes with, and how people kind of like how you have your family and everyone's supporting and everyone's right there, but for the ones who don't have that, what does that look like?
Right.
And the grief can come up in those moments.
What are specific ways that grief shows up differently in different people?
So for some people, grief could be, they become very irritable, right? So they don't want to be with anyone. They want to isolate sometimes. They can experience that in how they're feeling, and so they may not be able to name it, but it can come up in that way. For other people, grief could look, it could just be having those memories pop up and not really knowing what to do with those feelings, right? Not really knowing, do I want to be happy about these moments? Do I, how do I sit in them, and trying to figure out what to do with those memories as well. So it's kind of, sometimes we have happy memories, and then we have memories that remind us that they're not there. Yeah.
My mom passed away about almost 13 years ago. And it's so interesting because the date of her death is October 15th. And for some reason, I just was so sad leading up to it. And I hadn't even paused to look at the calendar to see that the anniversary of her passing was coming up. And I just remember being really weepy. And as women, our emotions are complex anyway. We might be, we might have PMS. We might be
right.
Somebody might have made us mad.
Right.
So there's so many triggers. The list is so long.
Right.
And so being a woman and having these complex emotions, it was really hard for me to understand. Why am I feeling this way.
Yes.
I checked the box. Okay, it's not that time of the month. It's nobody made me mad. Right? Why am I crying? And there's a book called The Body Keeps Score.
Yes.
And it talks about the trauma that you may have experienced and how like your body remembers. And so there are these reactions that your body may have to certain times of the year or certain triggers that we may not even realize, but our body realizes it.
Right, absolutely. And then all of a sudden it connects, right? And you sit with yourself for a little bit and you're like, what is happening? And then you start to kind of check off, like you said, do the checklist, and you realize, oh, okay, the date is coming up. And I'm starting to feel it, and then it all starts to make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little about motherhood. And so as you go through this grief, we have to continue to live, right?
Yes.
So if you are a mom who has lost your mom, such as myself, I still have to show up for my children every day. How can grief impact a mother's role and the relationship with her children?
Yeah, so if you haven't dealt with your grief, right, if grief is that strong, sometimes it can make you disconnect, right? And so when we talk about having to deal with our grief and show up, if we're not dealing with our grief or we're not recognizing that it is grief, then we can disconnect sometimes, and so we won't show up fully in our motherhood, right? Because we're missing something and we're missing someone, and so that kind of creates this distance sometimes. And then other ways, I think it's being able to maybe acknowledge that grief a little bit and just name it. Like, it's here, it's happening. Because the more we try to bottle it up or say when we want to deal with it, right? We don't really always have that control when we say, okay, I'll deal with it later. But more of how do we incorporate it sometimes. So how do I acknowledge my grief, still show up with my family, and be supported as well, you know? Because I think that sometimes we want to separate it, but it kind of all goes hand in hand.
Right. Well, what are ways that we can pull the family in? So if I am experiencing this and I still have to be there as a mom, it's part of the journey.
Yes.
You know, it's part of who you are now. Although it's definitely sad and it's definitely something that we should pause to acknowledge. But what are some ways that we can bring our family and community along with us?
Yeah. So I think it's looking at how do we want to remember the person that we're missing, right? So do we make it a thing, right? So maybe as part of Mother's Day, before you go to have dinner, maybe you find a way, whether you go visit a graveside, whether you go and just take a moment to say, okay, we're going to light a candle, we're going to do this to acknowledge and to remember, and then, you know, being able to do the activities and things as, you know, as your family is present in there, but creating something where it's not just you holding on to that by yourself, but you found a way to incorporate everyone else so it doesn't feel you don't feel so alone or so isolated, but it also kind of becomes, it's you choosing how you remember and how that grief shows up and incorporating that in the celebration.
Right. That's good advice. I like that.
Thanks.
For sure. When we think about professional help and having that person as a part of your support network, what is your advice for finding a quality therapist and someone who is going to provide you with the tools that you need to get through some of those hard times?
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to choosing your therapist, I think some things are really important. I always tell people, have a list. So what are you looking for? Like, what makes you feel safe and connected? Being able to do a consultation like with your therapist. And so there's many ways, whether they choose to use like Psychology Today, Therapy for Black Girls, there's many different ways to go and search for a therapist. But when you do make that initial connection, asking them, do you have experience with grief? You know, one, wanting to make sure that they're comfortable with it, right? That could be their specialty. And the other thing is, you know, have a conversation with them, make sure you feel connected, you know, and then starting your sessions. And I think from just a therapist perspective, it's having that person, having the one that can help you know it's coming, and then say, okay, here's how we prep for it, right? Instead of waiting till it's here, we know that this time of year is coming, we know, you know, that this is a hard time, so how do we start to prep for that?
Now, would you recommend going to see a therapist like on an annual basis, or how often, based on how you're feeling? Are there any triggers that would say, okay, I know this is grief, but this feels different?
So I think for me, therapy is ongoing. So we always think about therapy about crisis. It's not about crisis. It's about being able to have that lifeline when the ebbs and flows of life happen. So it doesn't always have to be centered around something happening, right? And so when we think about that, like you're saying, like going once a year, well, depends on what's going on in your life, you know. But I think checking in regularly so that you always are connected to someone, so that when things do kind of blindside us, something pops up, we're not having to search for someone in those moments.
Right.
We've already been connected and identified our person, our therapist, so that then we can reach out. So it's really about having them, connecting with them, inside and outside of crisis.
Yes, maintenance.
Yes, there we go.
Just like our car, right? We
Right,
want to
absolutely.
make sure our car runs not only when we, have something that's broken.
Yeah, we want, like your doctor, you know, you have your doctor.
Yes.
You know, I tell people all the time, it's just like that. Once that thing happens, you want to be able to connect.
Right. And in some instances, it may be easiest to just isolate. What came up for you when I asked that question? What does isolation kind of come to mind?
I think because we isolate because we feel like, sometimes we feel like it's better for everyone. Like, people won't see me, my family will be fine, they won't be disrupted by my grief. And so when we think about isolating, we sometimes tend to think that it's better for everyone else. But isolating is actually hard it can create other issues, right? Because we're sitting in silence, we're handling it on our own, we aren't reaching out, we're not saying what we need. And so in isolation, we don't always have the support that we need and the eyes that we need to say, hey, I see you, let me help you. You know, we're hiding it a little bit.
Right. So we should also be on the lookout to see how we can help other people or those in our network who we may notice that might try to slip away a little bit.
You know, if you know it's a sensitive time for someone, if you know you have a friend, you've been friends for a long time, you know they struggle around this time of year, definitely reach out. You know, reach out, check on them. You know, just being able to say, I'm here whenever you're ready, or if you need me, I'm here. Sometimes I think people just need to know, like, I'm not bothering you. I'm not, I'm not interrupting anything. That, you know, when you reach out and say, I'm here, it's letting them know, like, okay, you know, you can, like, it's okay. I'm here for you.
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk a little bit about infertility, or even those women who may have lost children. How does that grief show up around this time of year, and what advice do you have for them to make sure that they're taking care of themselves?
Yeah, so I think in both of those ways, whether you're dealing with infertility or the loss of a child, that journey is very unique, right? That journey is unique to them, and I think it's during that time, similar to like remembering someone you've lost, like a parent. This is kind of the same way, like if you lost your child, how do you want to take that time to remember, you know, or what works best for you? Because I think everyone is different, and so maybe it's harder for them to think about memories. You know, maybe they acknowledge it in a way that's very simple, and they can get through their day. And then sometimes it is, do we light a candle? Do we, you know, make reference to it? Do we kind of talk about it? And I think it's just really, a lot of times it's hard where, again, they're looking and they're watching people and they're seeing everyone else, right? And so it's being able to say, what do I need? I know it's going to come up. I know, for example, you can say, hey, you know, you've been dealing with infertility for a while. It's a thing for you. But being able to be okay with how you choose to address it, right? There's not a perfect way. Right. And I think that we give room for people, we don't know their struggle. And so it's giving room for them to show up how they need to without judgment, but just being there when they're ready.
And how, as friends, can we support them? I mean, is it okay to ask questions? Like, how do you? I feel like it's a sensitive topic.
It is a sensitive topic.
But you know, we love our friends, we love our family who may be going through.
Yeah, I think it's hard. We assume like let's say we have a baby or something happens with our kids, and we assume that we don't tell them because we don't want them to feel a certain type of way. But I think the first thing is just including them, allowing them to kind of say where their level is. Right. Sometimes I think we naturally, we don't want to say anything because we don't want to make them feel bad, or we don't, them to be sensitive about it. But I think we allow them to guide, right? So check in. Are you okay? Would you like to do this with us? Just kind of offering that space and then allowing them to decide if they're okay or not, or if they want to show up or not. But I think it's just always offering up and giving the space for it. I think sometimes we're in our own head because we feel uncomfortable about it, so we don't really know how to extend to people who are dealing with it.
Awesome. And for relationships with mothers who may be strained, so if and I have such a hard time with this because anytime I hear about a mom treating their daughter bad or a mother and daughter not having a good relationship, it just makes me so sad because I wish my mom was here, and every day I wish I could pick up the phone and call her and talk to her about my day, but I can't. And so for these mom and daughter relationships that are not strong, or even if a woman has grown up without a positive relationship with her mother, it's hurtful to me. But I'm sure they are also feeling that hurt. What do you recommend for some of those relationships that may be strained, and how do you, lean into some of those, those hard times?
It is hard. I think we have to acknowledge that in those relationships that both parties have to play their part. Right, and so where you may have one person trying harder than the other person, it can be difficult, right? It can create a bigger strain, or it can also feel that loss, right? We talk about that hoping you had a better relationship, but you don't, right? And so you're here with this strained relationship. I think we have to sometimes accept, like, here's where we are. What do I want to do with what we have? And then, you have to look at it like, how is this showing up? So is this helpful? Is this hurting me? Is this continuing to kind of create more grief for me? And so I think it's, looking at how is it showing up? So how is it impacting you, right? This strained relationship. And I think sometimes we have to look at both parties. How are we trying? Or, how do we, sometimes we have to acknowledge that we have to let it be where it is. And that's hard.
Absolutely, because you might get to a point where I've done all I can. I've tried to be solution oriented, and there's no solution to us moving forward in a positive way. So I think this is probably the end of our relationship.
Yes, and that's grief in itself, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so when that happens, I'm sure there's a period of time where you could grieve, or maybe it's a relief in some instances, like I no longer have this burden of this other person, and I'm like releasing the relationship.
I think you have to think about some of this battle could have been going on since childhood, and you think about how it's impacted them. For some people, self-preservation is, I have to let this go.
For sure.
Right? And even though it's your parent, and even though it's hard, but is this continuing to do more harm than good? And I think it's acknowledging what that looks like. And for some people, it is like, I can breathe, because the boundary that I set is that I can no longer have you here in my life, right? And it's a hard place to come to, but you have to look at, again, is this pouring into me, or is this taking away from me? And what impact is it having on you, right? And so this is where maybe they have to work it out in therapy. Maybe you both can go to therapy, but most importantly, the person, the mom or the daughter or both individually need to go and just make sure that they've processed things, they've worked through what they need to, so it's not showing up as a parent.
And if you are a mom who may have had a strained relationship, how do you make sure that you're cultivating a positive relationship with your own children and kind of breaking that cycle?
I think the first thing is you have to go make sure you're good. Right, and so that's working through in therapy, working through your own relationship with your mom or lack thereof, right? So if you didn't have a positive one, working through that, right? Working through those wounds, working through those things, so that your kids are getting this healed version of you, right?
Yes.
They're getting the best of you. And sometimes we parent from what we didn't get, or what we hoped we had, or those wounds. And so you doing the self-work is really key to being able to show up and parent and giving them your child the best opportunity to have the best version of you.
Right. Now, overall, regardless of whatever type of grief you may be going through at this moment, whether it's a relationship or infertility or a passing of a parent, what advice do you have just in general? If you can sum up everything that we've kind of talked about today, what advice would you have for our listeners?
Dealing with grief. I think the first thing, the important part is to name it. Is to acknowledge that it's there, and then, what do you want to do with that grief? What do you want to do with it? How is it showing up? What's the best way for you to process it? What do you need in those moments? And I think it's being able to say what you need, allow people to show up for you, and just know that grief is going to come and go. Grief is a journey. It's not a one stop. So this year it may look one way, the next year it may look another way.
I'm a testament of that.
And it's really being open to the fact that that journey is a journey. And so where we don't get stuck in one way, be flexible about how you handle yourself in those moments. Because again, it might be a happy memory. The next time it might be a memory that just really shakes you to your core, right? But it's being able to give yourself grace as you navigate it. It's not perfect. Asking for what you need again, but allowing yourself to move through the moment. Not a perfect way to do it, but I think when we try to bottle it up, when we try to suppress it, then it's going to come out.
Yeah.
It's going to come out. Yeah. Why not get ahead of it and say, you know what, I'm in this, I feel this in this moment, here's how I choose to let it show up.
Right.
Yeah.
Great advice. And my takeaways are...
What are your takeaways? I love that.
Give myself praise.
Yes.
Set boundaries where I need to.
Yes.
So if I'm having a moment, either bring them in or set the boundary. Right? Continue to pour from my overflow.
Yes, absolutely.
And then be supportive. So I do have friends who are in each of these segments that we talked about today, whether it's passing of a mom. I have other women who unfortunately we're in that same like sisterhood of not having a mom around anymore. But then I also know women who are going through infertility issues or have lost a child or have a strained relationship with their mom. So just making sure that I am showing up in a way that is supportive and being that loving friend that I would want for them to be to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's amazing, and I think that there's just knowing that it's not a perfect way to do it,
for sure,
but just showing up is a lot. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So tell us how we can find you. You've written a book. Tell us about your book. What are all the things that you've got exciting going on in your world?
So you can find me on my social media handles are Fit Life Wellness LLC. I have a 30-day guided journal that I wrote, and it's really it's 4 weeks. It's a guide. Every day is a different prompt, but it's really to help you increase your self-awareness, allow yourself to process what's happening with you, and just kind of be open to the space of growth. You can again find all my social media handles are Fit Life Wellness LLC. And I'm always doing either a workshop or something, so just stay tuned to my social media. You'll always see what's coming up and what's happening.
Oh, I can't wait to join. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
To our audience, thanks for tuning in, and we will chat next time.